Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam and this is Worlds Watch, a new version, where we're going to go over every region's best of fives. This time we're going over the CBLOL right in Brazil, and this is the last one, at least of this particular format, or in the way that they look. I've got a lot of thoughts about the ways in which they're consolidating the three American regions. It is bad, just point blank. We're losing a lot of teams. We're losing a lot of great opportunities, and it's a shame. This was a pretty good playoff run, at least from the CBLOL perspective. And while I don't have any high hopes that they're going to make a big splash of things going into Worlds, this is still a fantastic squad that they're going to be sending in. Now, a couple of things to note before we go into the review of these. If you're wondering when you're seeing this, I have a TikTok down below where I review and post them as I finish watching them to the best of my ability. With regards to everything happening in this particular best of five, the CBLOL ran theirs on patch 14.15. They're only sending one representative, and frankly, there's not much more to preamble from this. Without further ado, let's take a look. Our second reverse sweep of the summer, and oh boy. FURIA create for us some simple re-engage compositions with a strong early game focus for neutrals, and honestly, as an approach for them, it kind of works. But I don't find anything particularly noteworthy with regards to their coordination, map play, and vision. Everything is kind of above board, which is why it's so troubling to see that most of the progress they make is off the mistakes of Loud. The most reactive playstyle does not give me hope that FURIA would make even for solid international contenders. Loud aren't much better. They have stronger coordination, better adaptation, neutral approach, pound for pound just a stronger team. But given how weak of a start they have to the series, I'm not a fan of warm-up game teams. If you want to contend with the best internationally, you have to be hot right out the gate or wind up left behind. Both still have time to correct these flaws if they want the singular CBLOL slot, but we'll see. My MVP of this series is Robo for the ways in which he disrupts FURIA's backline at every opportunity. This was round 1 of the CBLOL upper bracket, FURIA versus Loud. Clean execution in a lot of ways from Red Canids. Now, Fluxo attempts a lot of things during this series that falls flat, from early game aggression, neutral-based skirmishing, scaling compositions. The failure to execute comes from many of steps that are needed that are skipped, especially in the early to mid game. On top of it, an inability to play towards their late game while behind, which is rather notable because the Red Canids don't have the strongest execution either. They're just a lot more consistent, and if Fluxo wants to bounce back in the lower bracket, patience is key. Now, the Red Canids, for their part, have some very strong coordination and late-game map play. Everything else is mostly standard. I would commend them on being able to bounce back from their errors in ways that most teams would be unable to, while also limiting any repetition of those errors. They aren't quite at the level of international play, but this is such a good start, and we'll have to just see how they approach teams with better early game play. My MVP of this series is Aegis for the ways in which he played around each stage of the game and how he enabled the team fight so fluidly. This was round 1 of CBLOL upper bracket, Fluxo versus Red Canids Kalunga. Unearned confidence. Fluxo show a great deal of hesitation, lack of coordination, bad reading of the map, and generally a team that I don't think anyone should have had confidence in, even if they somehow managed to move on to the next round. Although it almost happened, this is primarily from a strong read of their opponent's win conditions and properly discerning large missteps. They just couldn't pull off the punish plays consistently enough to make it work. Meanwhile, FURIA was the expected victors, and equally, no one should expect miracle runs from them. They are better coordinated with a stronger sense of win conditions and a solid macro plays all around, but they play on the edge, really wanting to push any small advantages way too far and too often, and rely on their ability to team fight instead of properly setting up their plays and taking their time. This costs them 2 games in a series that could have easily been a clean sweep. My MVP for the series is IU, who was the most consistent player on this squad. This was CBLOL's round 1 lower bracket, Fluxo versus FURIA. I had to regularly ask myself, why would they make that choice during the series? Not in any good way, really. Loud continued to show signs of the warm-up game situation. Now they have excellent vision, solid coordination, some good neutral setups, but all of it keeps falling flat and is inconsistent as I find myself baffled by the macro and micro errors each player makes on this squad, only to show themselves to be slightly better by the 3rd game, which would be too late. Pain is a little better in this card. Their coordination was stronger, holding a better sense of their win conditions, ballooning leads fabulously, quite really, and knowing how to play to their tempo to close out games. But they weren't better with regards to the errors that were made. I can't say with confidence that Pain would play well on the international stage, given that teams at Worlds will do more than just punish the kinds of mistakes they pulled. They would flip the whole game and gain leads from it in their favor. My MVP for this series is Titan for how he seemed untouchable during this entire series. This was round 2 of the upper bracket in the CBLOL, Loud versus Pain Gaming. I wonder how players choose targets sometimes. The Red Canids find themselves with some solid coordination, great early gameplay, a nice attention to neutral setups, and all around a decent approach to their win conditions. Things start to take an issue when it comes to the late game and closing out games themselves. There's this sense of hesitation that I see that makes games just last longer, have very questionable target selections, leading to their opponents more and more chances to come back. Now, Vivo, for their part, have an incredible proficiency in terms of ballooning leads, closing out games with their coordination and much of their fundamentals. I have some concerns regarding their consistency in the early game. A lot of it is high tempo, allowing them to play a style that creates their large leads and closing out games fairly nicely, but is also rather reckless at times. Once they fumble, they are playing on their back foot for a long time, which at least they've shown us to be very solid at. It's just a matter to see how consistent they can get between now and the finals. My MVP for this series is Lelico for how much of a teamfight impact he had. This was round 2 of the upper bracket in the CBLOL, Red Canid Kalungas versus Vivo Stars. As rematches go, this is a pretty good one. Now I can clearly see the improvements from FURIA. Their coordinations are sharper, their early game is a little better and with a lot more purpose, and their neutrals are better set up. But that's kind of it. We still had a team whose most of the progress are from fumbles from their opponent and are just kind of showing to be pretty good overall. And you really need to be more than just good enough to be Worlds contenders. Loud don't have the warm-up game fumbles, like at least this time, keeping true to being just that much better in a lot of categories, especially regarding skirmishes and coordinations and macro plays, but the consistency is still an issue here, like a big one. One that I don't think will be fixed when it matters in the upcoming rounds. This is not what a Worlds caliber team looks like, and Loud needs to be more consistent if they want to improve and be prepared for that kind of tournament. My MVP for this series is Canids, who seem determined to get Loud to the next round regardless of who they face. This was the CBLOL's lower bracket round 2, FURIA versus Loud. When these two teams scrap, they really go at it. Now, Vivo continue to show and prove how solid of a team they are on their fundamentals. They balloon leads incredibly well, close out games with ease, strong coordination all around. This is a team that on the surface could be a solid CBLOL rep. That said, their early game struggles still persist, and while playing is something, playing like ahead or playing behind is something that they excel at, playing behind most of the time is not a great look. Pain Gaming, for their part, also play with some great coordination, some strong ballooning, a good amount of neutral approach, and a lot of momentum, but they don't play from behind very well and tend to be over-aggressive when making leads or from any part one behind, which makes it a lot harder to keep the leads on a regular basis. Both teams make for excellent rivals but questionable international contenders. My MVP for this series is Weiser for how much space he created for his team. This is round 3 of the CBLOL upper bracket, Vivo Cade Stars versus Pain Gaming. This series is a lot closer than the scoreline would indicate. Loud in this series don't fumble because of warm-up games. In fact, their proactivity, coordination, and understanding of the win conditions do a lot during these 3 games. What really gets them is the impatience to have the game move at their own pace and take anything while playing behind in either of those positions. They also really don't play well from behind. Meanwhile, the Red Canids' proactivity, coordination, and skirmishing, on top of some solid macro plays, keep their hopes alive for a little longer. I have larger concerns regarding their ability to stay consistent to balloon leads or even avoid micro errors from each members that really halt the pace of their games. But as it stands, right now they're not quite worlds ready, but could be with a lot of polishing. My MVP for this series is FNB, who managed to cause so many issues for Loud. This was round 3 of the lower bracket of CBLOL, Loud versus Red Canids Kalunga. With regards to this rematch, either team moving on would have been fine here, but very little improvements have happened, even though it's notable. The Red Canids continue to show some incredible ballooning, coordination, neutral approaches, all the good stuff, especially during the early game. Some aspects of their micro errors have also been corrected, however, their consistency is what really did them in. You would find them in the throes of their momentum, only for one wrong macro choice, one misplayed fight, and boom, they crumble under their pressure. Vivo Cades are still the solid team we've seen them be, but now with stronger early game, although not consistent early game. Frankly, the coordination, macro play, ballooning, all of it is still incontested from them in the CBLOL, but they seem allergic to playing while ahead, consistently at this point. They're so adept at playing while behind that we see this reflected in the length of their games and series, which is unfortunate because at their peak, when they're in the lead and playing efficiently, they close out games so fast and it looks good. So why don't they do it more often? My MVP for the series is Leleco for how much pressure he put on Red during this entire series. This was a rematch of the CBLOL's lower bracket round 4, Red Canids Kalunga versus Vivo Cade Stars. Congrats to Pain Gaming on being the 18th team to qualify for Worlds. Vivo Cade seemed to have their early game woes behind them in this series, but they didn't quite pull off some of their usual plays. While their coordination and neutral approach stayed about the same, there seemed to be a discontinuous struggle to balloon leads where needed and a general lack of focus around their win conditions as well as macro plays. For a rematch, this was not the Vivo Cades I expected, and it feels a little disappointing. But they still managed to give a lot of trouble to Pain Gaming, who, for their part, seemed a bit overeager. There was incredible coordination with very strong sense to their win conditions that, granted, there's still this sense that they don't play well from behind than when they have the lead, but it's loads better than the last series they played. And if you top that up with some excellent approach to ballooning leads while ahead, and this is a pretty solid CBLOL rep for the World Championship stage. My concern is still with the over-aggression and many micro errors that will be punished heavily on the international stage by, frankly, every team. My MVP for this series is Stan, who was locked in this series. This was the grand finals of the CBLOL and a rematch, Vivo Cade Stars versus Pain Gaming. Honestly, out of all of the teams for the CBLOL to send in, Pain Gaming is a really good one. This has been an organization that is stuck with the CBLOL for literally its inception. It has been here the entire time. And I imagine that this team will stick in for when the convergence happens for the South Quadrant, however they're going to call it, or South Conference, whatever. So in terms of representing the CBLOL as we know it, a region that's been around since 2012 or 2013. I'm pretty sure 2012. As I double check live, yes, it's 2012. Like this is a fairly old region in and of itself. It is one of the biggest regions around. And it is a fucking shame that it is being consolidated and infused with the LCS. Yep. Mm-hmm. Because neither of those regions, the LCS or the CBLOL, deserve this kind of bullshit. Deserve to stand on their own legs. The CBLOL does not deserve to lose more teams and be forced to play within this conference. It's not okay. But as far as everything goes, these guys are going to be great. There's a lot of proactivity with them. They really push the envelope. If I'm just going to do a hard pivot with everything. This is a fairly proactive team with a lot of aggression, a lot of solid coordination. They know what their win conditions are. It's just that the execution of it is wonky sometimes. But that comes with the baggage of the CBLOL. And that's more than worth it sometimes. The wording I put on it specifically is that they're a little over eager sometimes with their approach to ballooning leads and everything. But regardless of their microaggression or any of the micro errors, which is expected, Pain Gaming will probably represent the CBLOL in not just its essence, but its play style the best that it can. And hopefully we still get to see them for years to come within the American Conference or League, for whatever that's going to be called. But those are my thoughts, at least, within the situation, as scattered all over the place that they are. Are you happy with the results of this particular playoffs? What was your favorite run? I would love to hear any and all of your thoughts in the comments down below, including how you feel about the whole merger thing. With that, thank you again for watching. I deeply appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.